The airplane cabin buzzed with the usual shuffle of passengers finding their seats, sliding bags into overhead bins, and trading polite excuse me's. David walked down the aisle, rolling his carry-on behind him. He was calm, quiet, just another traveler heading home after a long week of work. Seat 14A. That was his, a window seat. He slid his bag overhead and sat down, fastening his seatbelt. For the first time all week, he allowed himself to relax. But the peace didn't last long. A woman with a sharp voice and a tighter expression stopped in the aisle. She looked at David, then at her ticket, then back at David again. "You're in the wrong seat," she snapped. David glanced up. "No, ma'am. This is 14A. She held up her boarding pass. "This is supposed to be my row. You need to move." David kept his calm. "Your ticket says 14B. That's the middle seat. Mine is 14A, the window." Her lips pressed thin. "No, I always sit by the window. You'll have to switch." David shook his head gently. "Sorry, I booked this one specifically." The woman, Karen, huffed loudly, looking around at the nearby passengers. Unbelievable. They let anyone sit anywhere these days. David ignored the jab, looking out the window. But Karen wasn't done. She dropped into the middle seat beside him with a dramatic sigh, already twisting to make herself more comfortable while bumping into him repeatedly. The plane continued to fill. People noticed the tension. Karen wasn't whispering. She wanted to be heard. "I don't feel safe sitting here," she muttered loud enough for the row in front and behind to hear. "They should have better rules about who they let on these planes." David turned his head slowly. "Excuse me?" Karen folded her arms. "Don't play dumb. People like you make me nervous. I want to switch seats. Better yet, I want you moved off this plane." The couple in the row across glanced over. The man shook his head slightly, but no one spoke up yet. David inhaled through his nose, steady and controlled. "I have as much right to this seat as you do. I'm not going anywhere." Karen pushed her call button. The chime rang, and a flight attendant hurried over with a professional smile. "Yes, ma'am? How can I help?" Karen pointed at David like she was pointing at a problem, not a person. "This man is making me uncomfortable. I don't want him sitting here. Move him somewhere else. Or better yet, get him off this plane." The flight attendant blinked, taken aback. She looked at David, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, he has a valid ticket for this seat. Unless there's a safety issue, he stays right here." Karen's voice rose. "I said I don't feel safe. Isn't that a safety issue? Are you seriously telling me I have to be squished in here next to him?" The flight attendant's smile faded. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." But Karen leaned back dramatically, raising her hands. "Oh, so now my concerns don't matter? Unbelievable. This airline is a disgrace. I'm telling you, he's suspicious. Look at him." David stayed silent, but his jaw flexed. He could feel every eye on them now. Some people shook their heads at Karen. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, wishing the situation would end. The flight attendant spoke firmly this time. "Ma'am, Mr. Johnson has every right to sit here. Unless you have an actual complaint beyond being uncomfortable, he is not moving." Karen glared, her cheeks flushed with anger. "Fine, then I'll escalate this. You'll see." She folded her arms again, muttering under her breath. But the words weren't quiet enough. David heard every one. "This is ridiculous. People like him shouldn't even be allowed on flights. I don't know why they keep lowering standards." David closed his eyes, steadying himself. He had been through worse than this. But still, it burned. He could feel the disrespect in every word she spit out. He knew he could end it right now. One flash of the leather badge holder in his bag, and the entire plane would fall silent. But he didn't. Not yet. Sometimes it's better to let arrogance show itself fully, so there's no question who's in the wrong. And Karen? She wasn't done yet. Karen shifted in her seat, arms folded tight, like a child throwing a tantrum, but her eyes sharp with malice. Every bump of her elbow against David's arm was intentional now. She wanted him to feel unwelcome. The flight attendant, trying to keep peace in the cabin, had already moved on, but Karen wasn't finished. She leaned forward, flagging down another attendant, passing with a tray of drinks. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Can I please speak to the pilot? I don't feel safe sitting here." The attendant looked startled. "Ma'am, the pilot is preparing for departure. If there's a problem, I can help." Karen jabbed her thumb toward David. "The problem is him. I told the other girl already. He's making me uncomfortable. He's acting suspicious." David turned his head slowly. "All I've done is sit down." Karen ignored him, speaking over him. "He won't stop staring. He's giving me a bad feeling. Look, I fly all the time, and I know when something's wrong. He doesn't belong here. I want him off this plane." The attendant frowned. "Ma'am, Mr. Johnson has been cooperative and quiet. There's no reason to remove him." Karen's voice rose. "So you're ignoring me too? If something happens up here, it'll be on you. Don't say I didn't warn anyone." Nearby passengers shifted in their seats. A man in the aisle seat across the row spoke up finally. "Lady, he hasn't done a thing. You're the only one causing problems here." Karen whipped her head toward him. "Excuse me? Mind your own business." The man shook his head. "We're all tired. Let us fly in peace." Karen huffed, red-faced. She grabbed her phone, snapping a picture of David without asking. "Fine. If no one else is going to take this seriously, I'll get proof. When this makes the news, they'll all see I was right." David's jaw tightened. He shifted slightly in his seat, but still didn't speak. His silence wasn't weakness, it was patience. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing their taxi to the runway. The cabin quieted down, but Karen leaned closer to the flight attendant one more time, her voice sharp. "If he does anything suspicious up here, remember that I warned you. Don't blame me." The attendant simply nodded, moving down the aisle to avoid making the situation worse. As the plane lifted into the sky, Karen's muttering started again. She pulled her blanket up, shook her head dramatically, and whispered to the woman in the row ahead of her. "It's disgraceful, isn't it? How they just let anyone on board? Back in the day, there were standards. Now look where we are." The woman turned slightly, gave her a flat look, and said nothing. Karen's whispers turned sharper. "You think I'm wrong? Watch. You'll see. I know people like him. Always trouble. Always a risk. The airline should thank me for pointing it out." David stared out the window, the clouds rolling past. Inside, though, he was weighing every moment. He could shut this down in 5 seconds, but part of him knew that letting Karen keep digging her hole would make the lesson hit harder, and Karen was digging deeper by the minute. Halfway through the flight, she pressed the call button again. Another chime. Another attendant leaned over. Karen wasted no time. "Listen, either you move him or I'll file a complaint the second we land. I'm not joking. This man shouldn't be sitting next to me. I don't care what his ticket says." The attendant sighed. "Ma'am, please." Karen cut her off. "No, enough. I'm a paying customer, and I refuse to sit next to someone who makes me feel unsafe. Either you move him or I want to talk to the air marshal right now." That name, Air Marshal, made a few passengers glance over. They knew this had gone too far. David turned his head, finally locking eyes with Karen. Calm, controlled, but there was steel in his voice now. "Careful with your words." Karen sneered. "Don't you threaten me." David didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He simply repeated, "Careful with your words." The silence that followed made Karen even angrier. She wanted him flustered, shouting, proving her point. But his calm only made her look worse. She jabbed her call button again. "Fine, get the marshal. Let's see what he thinks." The attendant exchanged glances with another crew member. They both looked uneasy. Finally, one of them nodded. "All right, ma'am, we'll check." Karen sat back, arms crossed, triumphant. Good. Finally, someone listening. When he's escorted off this plane, don't say I didn't call it. David closed his eyes again, leaning back into his seat, letting the storm swirl around him. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to argue. Because the moment the marshal came, or anyone from the crew with authority, the truth would come out. And when it did, Karen's world would crash down. The minutes ticked by with heavy silence. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but all eyes kept drifting toward row 14. Karen sat stiff, chin high, convinced she'd soon be vindicated. David sat beside her, calm as ever, gazing out the window like nothing at all was happening. Finally, movement came from the front. A man in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable posture of authority, walked down the aisle with a flight attendant. He wasn't in uniform, but the bulge of his holster was clear under his jacket. Passengers whispered, "The Air Marshal." Karen sat up straighter, a smug smile spreading across her face. She pointed dramatically at David. "That's him. That's the one making me feel unsafe. I told you. I told everyone. He's suspicious. Get him off this plane before something happens." The marshal stopped at their row. His eyes moved from Karen to David, scanning both with practiced calm. "Ma'am, I'll need you to lower your voice," he said firmly. Karen blinked. "Excuse me? I'm the one reporting the problem." "And I hear you," the marshal replied evenly. "Now I'm going to hear from him." He turned to David. "Sir, can I see your ID?" The cabin grew still. Some passengers leaned forward, craning to see. Karen crossed her arms, whispering, "Finally." David looked at the marshal for a long second, then reached calmly into his bag under the seat. He pulled out a slim black leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold badge gleamed. The photo ID beside it read, "Federal Bureau of Investigation." A ripple moved through the cabin like a wave. Gasps, murmurs. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, he's FBI." Karen's face drained of color. What? The marshal gave a single nod, his face relaxing. "Thank you, Agent Johnson." Karen whipped her head toward David. "Agent?" David finally turned, his calm gaze locking onto her. His voice was steady, but firm enough to cut through the cabin. "Yes, FBI, and I was hoping for a quiet flight. But you decided to make that impossible." Karen stammered, her voice wobbling. I didn't know. I thought." David's tone sharpened. "You thought what? That I didn't belong here? That I wasn't safe to sit next to you because of how I look?" Karen's lips trembled. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," David said, cutting her off. His voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it was undeniable. Every word you spoke, every accusation you made, came from exactly what you meant. You tried to humiliate me in front of everyone here. You tried to weaponize fear and authority against me. And you would have succeeded if not for the truth. The cabin was silent except for the low roar of the engines. The marshal spoke up, addressing Karen now. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and stay seated for the rest of this flight. If there's one more outburst, we'll be making a report when we land." Karen's mouth fell open. "A report? Against me? I'm the one who—" "You're the one who caused a disturbance," the marshal said flatly. "You pushed that call button multiple times, accused an innocent passenger of being dangerous, and disrupted the cabin. That's on you." Karen looked around desperately, searching for allies, but all she found were cold stares. The passengers who had endured her tantrum now had the full picture, and none were on her side. An older woman across the aisle shook her head slowly. "You should be ashamed." Karen's cheeks burned red. "This isn't fair," she muttered, shrinking back into her seat. David watched her for a moment longer before turning back to the window. He didn't need to say more. The badge had said everything. But the lesson wasn't over yet. The marshal leaned slightly toward David, lowering his voice. "Agent Johnson, would you like to file something when we land?" David shook his head gently. "Not yet. Let's just get through the flight." The marshal nodded, gave Karen one last warning look, and moved back up the aisle. For the next half hour, The plane was quiet. Karen sat frozen in her seat, hands gripping her armrests, no words left in her mouth. David leaned back, eyes closed, reclaiming the peace she had tried to steal. But the silence didn't last. Shame has a way of boiling over, and Karen couldn't hold hers in. She leaned toward David, her voice low but trembling. I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. David opened his eyes, turning his head just enough to meet her gaze. That's the point. You shouldn't have to know. Respect isn't about who someone is. It's about basic human decency. Her lips trembled again. I was just nervous. I thought— You didn't think, David interrupted. You judged. And then you acted on that judgment, loudly, publicly, trying to strip me of dignity. You wanted me off this plane. Do you understand how dangerous that is? What if I wasn't FBI? What if I was just a father, heading home to his kids, a teacher, a nurse, anyone? You would have dragged them through this humiliation just the same. Karen's eyes glistened. She didn't answer. David's tone softened slightly, but it was still sharp. Next time, remember this. Not everyone will have a badge to protect them, but everyone deserves respect. Karen sank back into her seat, staring down at her hands. For once, she was speechless. Around them, the passengers pretended to go back to their books, their phones, their snacks. But the truth was, the entire cabin had just witnessed a lesson, one they wouldn't forget. By the time the plane touched down, the tension had melted into a different kind of silence. Karen was pale, subdued, a shadow of the loud woman who had demanded attention at every turn. David, steady as ever, grabbed his bag from the overhead bin and waited for the aisle to clear. As he stepped off the plane, the younger flight attendant, who had defended him earlier, gave a small nod. Thank you, Agent Johnson. David gave a faint smile. No, thank you for standing your ground. When he walked through the terminal, blending into the crowd, he felt no need to look back. Justice had already been served. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth, patience, and the weight of a badge revealed only when the time was right. And Karen? She left the plane last, eyes down, whispers following her every step. For once in her life, her voice wasn't the loudest in the room. Because everyone on that plane knew exactly what she had tried to do, and everyone knew exactly how badly she had failed. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was a badge flashing in the light for just a moment, enough to change everything. And for Karen, that moment would replay in her mind for a long, long time.